Hello and welcome to the webinar, State of CBD, Global Crisis Reveals 3 Insights about the Future of Consumer Consumption. I'm Chloe Taylor from Food Dive's Brand Studio, and I have the pleasure of facilitating our conversation about the state of CBD today with John Kueber, Chief Revenue Officer at SōRSE, a water-soluble emulsion technology provider for food, beverage, topicals, and nutraceutical brands. Like most CPG and retail brands, the CBD product industry is actively being disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's doing a lot more than that. It's also shining a light on some very interesting consumer behavior that we want to explore in our talk today. But before we get too invested in our conversation, I have a few housekeeping notes to share. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All of the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. And I want to call out the Q&A widget that allows you to ask questions of John. He will respond to you directly via the email you provide. And please note that slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right-hand corner of your presentation window. And now let me introduce you to today's expert, John Kueber, Chief Revenue Officer at SōRSE. John, thank you for joining us today.
Chloe, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Me too. Okay, let's get started. So, as the world adjusts to the reality of living through a pandemic, analysts and researchers are catching up with the data. This has led to fascinating reports from publications like Nielsen that describe the state of CPG and retail today. We're seeing changes like 15 times more e-commerce shopping compared to last year. Additional insights show that consumers are spending more on certain categories of shopping, such as home fitness, grocery, and medicine and medical supplies. And underscoring all of this is a sense that there's still more change to come, with Gallup reporting that most Americans think COVID will cause a long-term disruption. Consumer behaviors are changing in retail, and they're also changing around CBD. In fact, one of the product categories that's really taking off in the COVID economy is CBD products purchased online. In one example, the CBD sparkling water Mad Tasty saw a 40% increase in online sales since March 6th. And the THC licensed partner GML saw a 47% increase between February and March. Add this to the 56% jump in THC sales in the state of California, as well as states like Washington, Colorado, and New Jersey designating marijuana dispensaries to be essential services. John, you're much closer to the situation because you've been helping SōRSE customers navigate these changes. Can you speak about what you're seeing in the CBD marketplace as you help brands develop and position to be successful in this current economy?
Chloe, absolutely. And thanks so much again for the opportunity. At SōRSE, we work with over 40 different brands, and so we actually get to see quite a bit of a range of activity in the industry. So much has happened in CBD over the last several years, and COVID has just been this way of seeing consumer behavior and product behavior over a number of different categories. So like every industry, the last few months have had its challenges, from consumers changing their buying behavior to some brands being favored and some brands, in some cases, going away. But for the most part, COVID has been an opportunity for the CBD industry. And that's been helped by cannabis being designated as a essential business in most states, if not all states. CBD has been something that consumers turn to in times of stress and anxiety. And it's been a great opportunity for some of those brands to really shine. But I'm looking forward to more of our discussion in talking about how consumers are making those purchases, because those have not been, let's just say those are becoming a lot more stark and clear in some cases.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, John. And that's where we're taking this conversation. We're going to look at what this situation might be showing us about CBD consumer behavior long term. So looking at all the data and combining it with how we see CBD brands operating right now, there are 3 things we're learning about CBD customer behavior. CBD products are meeting the needs of increasingly health-conscious customers. They're proving to be a go-to for consumer lifestyle, health, and wellness needs. And CBD products can no longer depend on brick and mortar retail. We're going to explore each of these 3 changes in detail, but we also want to take it a step further. We're going to point out 3 smart moves CBD brands should be thinking about as they pivot and adjust to these changes in the marketplace. The first trend we're going to explore is that CBD products are really meeting the needs of increasingly health-conscious customers. So it's no secret that today's consumers, especially younger consumers, are increasingly concerned with creating healthy habits, including eating healthy foods. But they're also progressively more open to exploring new products like CBD in their pursuit of their best health. Right before COVID took over the headlines, CBD was positioned to be the biggest CPG and beauty trend of the year. But it's still a new and growing product, and consumers need more information before they start putting trust in the products, especially when it's not yet regulated or approved by the FDA. So the smart move we're recommending from this trend is that CBD brands need to focus on product quality and building consumer trust. John, tell us, what kinds of problems are CBD products facing when it comes to sourcing quality ingredients and creating products that meet the high standards of today's consumers? Like, can you tell us about consumer trust?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, when consumers are shopping for a health product, they need something that they feel an effect, and that's where trust is built. At the very least, it should be safe and have no adverse effects, but it should have something where the consumer feels a sense of well-being, and that needs to be the focus of all CBD providers. So unfortunately, CBD has, in some senses, relied on anecdotal evidence, or just the fact that there's a novelty of something having CBD in it. And consumers are starting to become a little bit more picky. So producers need to think pretty carefully about their production, about their ingredients, about their dosing, and about the effects that they're going to deliver to a consumer when they purchase their product. So in the last few months, we've actually seen some media coverage of certain producers who build a product and say there's 25 milligrams present, but when it goes to testing, oftentimes there's only 2 or 3 milligrams that the consumer is actually purchasing. And it's unfortunate because the FDA hasn't fully regulated CBD, and so some of these producers are able to continue doing so, but they're really doing themselves no favors by using ingredients or using a production methodology that isn't delivering that quality. I want to talk a little bit further on that, but just before I go further, any question there, Chloe?
Yeah, it's just really interesting to, we're talking about this product that makes claims, of course, among other things, to promote a sense of well-being. So, and I love that you're addressing trust here. We've got to have dosing that is consistent and that is reliable and that is, So keep talking. I love what you're saying.
Yeah. So basically the body treats CBD as an oil. Typically, CBD is an oil. That's how the body's going to naturally consume it. So, for example, when producers create a product, they should be going through steps to make sure that CBD is properly absorbed by the body. So in the case of SōRSE, we're focused on making CBD bioavailable. We actually modify the cannabinoid and enrobe it in food-safe ingredients. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. But it's really important to be able to have that bioavailability. It's really important that the CBD is stable, that consumers are going to get that dosing that they're looking for so that they feel some effects and so that they begin to trust your brand and trust your product. So I just can't emphasize enough the connection between having quality and that connection to health and trust. It really is a direct connection.
Gotcha. You want to take a look at that next slide and see if we can break it down here?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So this slide really does break down the 5 key components. There's probably some more subcategories we could talk about, but accurate dosing I've covered already. But again, when the consumer buys a beverage or a topical or an edible or a nutraceutical, they expect to have the dosing that they're purchasing. And when they consume it, they want the body to absorb it. They want it to be bioavailable. So ideally, what happens in the case of SōRSE, but ideally for all producers, when the consumer ingests that CBD, it shows up in the bloodstream in less than 10 minutes. Now, if something's being digested, some people refer to maybe some old school methods of edibles where maybe they didn't feel effects of something for 2 or 3 hours or longer. CBD is it's non-psychoactive. It is a more subtle effect of light anxiety relief or inflammation relief, but nonetheless, the consumer should really feel that. They should feel a difference when they ingest it. So it should be bioavailable. Of course, it shouldn't smell bad. It shouldn't taste bad. It's something where the characteristics of the beverage or the edible or whatever it is they're consuming, even if it's just a tablet, it shouldn't be a negative experience. It should be fun. It should be consistent with a brand, which is either fun or helpful. There are challenges with taste and smell, as you can imagine. And then just to round these out, being safe. Now, it's not just a catch-all word. Being safe means being food grade. Again, just because the FDA hasn't regulated this as an ingredient doesn't mean producers can't adopt all the best practices of the food industry over the last 50 years and having a clean label and abiding by standards that are important to consumers, like being allergen-free or kosher. And finally, the most boring one, but probably the most important, producers really need to be fixated on testing and Q&A. So this means not just going through testing through product creation, but once it's on the shelf, taking a second look at it a month later, 6 months later, to make sure it matches up with their label. Being really careful with certificates of analysis of the hemp itself or of all ingredients that they work with, and reviewing their methodologies and their ingredients on a regular basis. So we really see these as the pillars and cornerstones of successful producers.
Awesome. Yeah, and that last one doesn't feel boring to me because, there are a lot of products out there that make a lot of claims, and you want to know that you can rely on the claims they're making. So I definitely want to know how something's tested before I take it in to my body.
Absolutely.
So CBD product producers, I hope you're listening, because these are the, 5 ways to assure that, or to help ensure that you are building trust with your consumers. They need to know what's going on in this new plentiful world of CBD. So thanks, John. And it's great to see the factors broken down so clearly, and this is a way for CBD product producers to really get to measure their development process and see if it's delivering on an end result that's going to appeal to their customers.
Yeah. Maybe just a quick comment there. I mean, What I would say is if producers are thinking about it, you're on the right track. Sometimes we're talking to producers where they're really just focused on this middle pillar of making it an enjoyable product, the sensory part of it. And that is hugely important to make sure consumers have a good experience in some regards. But as long as you're thinking about those other ideas, there's ways to get there. Working with solid ingredient providers, this isn't meant to be high stress, but people need to be aware. I think that's my point.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for softening it a little bit for us. Okay, so there's another trend we're observing, and that is that CBD products are proving to be a go-to for consumer lifestyle and wellness needs, including mood. This is supported by some of the data coming in from Brightfield Group, a research firm that found that when COVID first emerged, CBD consumers surveyed between March 16th through 19th planned to change their behaviors and increase usage. 39% of respondents indicated they expected to use more CBD during the COVID crisis. And 49% of millennials and Gen Z consumers plan on using more CBD in the weeks and months to come. So when we pair this data with the hundreds of new CBD products on the market and the fact that as much as 10% of American adults are expected to use CBD products by 2025, it's easy to see that there's an opportunity for growth if brands position themselves for it. Because that's the underlying factor for the brands seeing increased sales today. They've already established a clear brand identity and audience, and they're serving it. So John, our lesson here is that CBD products need to get in and claim their mind share now while consumers are exploring and increasing usage. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So it is the time right now for CBD brands to build their brands, build their message, and make as much ground as they possibly can. And certainly marketing is always at the top of any early stage brand. But what's important about the timing here is, look, we all can't wait until the FDA regulates CBD, gives us some additional credibility. But until that happens, you're not going to see any of the larger players making significant investments into the space. So you're not going to see the Procter & Gamble's and the Cokes and other industry giants going headfirst into CBD quite yet. And until they do, this is the time to make investments where you can on marketing and identity and messaging and other components that allow you to get into the minds of consumers. And so this trend of being CBD for lifestyle and mood, absolutely it applies to those two of lifestyle and mood, but it can be for health, it can be for wellness, it could be for inflammation or other functional benefits. I'd stop short of making claims, but if your brand is about mood, then make sure that you do some testing with consumers so that they understand that your brand is about mood. If you have an opportunity to do some marketing right now with this, whether it's an influencer or other opportunity, sponsoring industry newsletters, now's that opportunity because it's about to get a lot more expensive and a lot more difficult to break through from noise in the next 6 to 12 months as more and more people enter the space.
Gotcha. Okay, so you said, what's likely to occur when the giants start to take this on? I mean, are you saying that if folks are prepared before that happens, then, yeah, can you speak a little more about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's compare it this way. Imagine someone trying to launch a new coffee brand right now or a new cola brand right now. I mean, just think about the incredible difficulty of battling with entrenched players where they have shelf space, where they've really made an emotional connection with consumers. Right now, that's not happening. And you see these brands that, I mean, they're not brand new. There's people in the CBD space who've been around for a couple of years, but they've really picked a position in the marketplace. They've chosen some messaging, and they're doing everything they can to get their product to the consumer or get it onto the shelves of health food stores or alternative retailers. Sure, it's not quite at scale, but they know that if they can get the metrics of sales with the limited retail they have and with the limited messaging they can do, that as this gets a little more opened up, they're going to have an advantage over late entrants who have bigger budgets and also are more likely to get investment from third parties if they've already made that ground.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me. So there's another trend we have not talked about as much yet, and that is trend 3, the sales channels available for CBD products today. So obviously e-commerce sales have really grown in light of so many brick and mortar locations being closed, but it's not working that way for every brand, only the ones that prepared themselves for multiple sales channels. Can you elaborate on that, John?
Yeah, this trend is really the one that jumps out from COVID, okay. And I've touched on it a couple times in my earlier points. But e-commerce has never been more important for CBD. I think people initially approached CBD as e-commerce being second or third part of their strategy, health food stores and alternative retail, and the idea of getting into larger chains being number one. And that may become more important over time. But right now, consumers have limited mobility, and they've really shown that they're willing to shop for CBD products online and buy repeatedly for products online. You mentioned earlier one of our partners, Mad Tasty, having a significant jump in e-commerce sales. Mm-hmm. And I want to point out that's for a beverage. A beverage is something that people don't always buy through e-commerce. It can be perceived as expensive to ship, even though there's often free shipping. But if you're shipping something like a concentrate or a powder or a tablet or a topical, if you don't have an e-commerce strategy right now, you need to start yesterday. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But e-commerce is emerging as the #1 way for CBD brands to sell product right now. And as we talked about before, using this time to make ground and build mind share. Right now, consumers are stuck at home with a lot more screen time. I mean, some are having limited mobility to do basics for shopping, but e-commerce is where they are searching and exploring and experimenting with new products like CBD. And it has to be coupled with e-commerce. It has to be coupled with e-commerce marketing. And it has to be coupled with the second point of clear messaging and brand that we talked about in Trend 2.
Great. This is really, really helpful. So that kind of segues into, let's talk about the journey of taking a CBD brand online or getting a brand e-commerce ready. So we have a few basic steps here on the slide based on observing CBD brands that have been successful. And we've also prepared a brief graphic organizer you can download after this webinar if you're more of a visual thinker. But John, could you please walk us through some of the things you've seen be successful for CBD brands as you're helping them along, the CBD brands that are using e-commerce right now?
You bet. So as most people know, but in case you don't, let's start with what's not going to work. So Amazon as a platform is not going to be successful for you. They do carry some topicals, but CBD is difficult to get into the Amazon marketplace, as it is with Shopify. So the #1 and #2 platforms for e-commerce are not really options for CBD. Once again, CBD is a challenging ingredient in many different ways. But so producers need to pursue an independent e-commerce strategy. They need to they don't need to program anything. There's ready-to-use tools that we'll talk about in the download. But it really is not that complicated. Yes, there's some execution of building that website and assembling the different plugins, like a Stripe account, for example, to take payment. But the basics are lots of imagery, professionally produced website, quick checkout, hopefully in 2 steps. And this one's important, multiple follow-ups, not just the follow-up of did you get your order, but really having a conversation established with the consumer, asking for feedback, asking for shares on social media, using e-commerce not just to sell your product, but to build that connection with the consumer. So it's going to take a little bit more work, but in terms of building your own e-commerce platform. But the upside is, unlike Amazon, you are able to build that direct connection with the consumer. And that's what's going to be important as CBD scales to make sure you're able to continue that dialogue.
Sure. Sounds great. This is really inspiring because we're all dealing with the impact of the pandemic, not just on our businesses, but our personal lives. We're changing our shopping behaviors and our job situations within our family and our networks. So being able to think about the future, however far off that might be, we have a lot of unknowns, but I'm hearing you say words like creativity and agility and building trust. And so if CBD product producers can get into the mindset of this creativity and agility and trust building in product development and marketing, we hope that will send them off in the right direction, basically, right?
Yeah.
we see that building some great progress.
We love being a partner to our clients some of the feedback we get sometimes is, look, we have our hands full talking to retailers, building e-commerce. It's great to have, and again, I'm using our company as an example. There's other quality ingredient providers elsewhere, but the feedback we get is it's great for them to be able to check the boxes of, we know we have quality ingredients, we know we have a good product development partner. There's a lot to think about, but these last two trends of building brand and building identity can take up some energy, and you want to find partners in those spaces, just as I recommend you have a strong ingredient and production partner to be able to build that quality product and trust.
Fantastic. Wow, fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. That's all the time we have, but thank you also to our audience for joining us. And if you have any questions for John, be sure to go to the Q&A widget to submit them. Remember, he'll get back to you via the email address you provide. Also, be sure to check out the resources link where we have additional information. Have a great day, everybody.